Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Peak Human Podcast. I'm Brian Sanders. I'm the creator of the Food Lies six-part documentary series, which is coming out next year. We're working on it daily. I'm going home to Hawaii to work on it in person for 3 weeks with my director editor. I'm also the founder of Nose to Tail. We got quality meat. We ship it right to you. We got other products, body care. We got all the good stuff. That's how this podcast is sponsored. That's how I support myself, and I support the great ranchers and my one employee over here in Austin. It's all possible from nosetotale.org. I also work with Dr. Gary at sapien.org. We help people change their life, reverse chronic diseases, lose weight, take back control of their health. Join our newsletter at sapien.org. Lots of good stuff each week, very valuable stuff, some specials for Nose to Tail, and that's about it. If you're a new listener, go back and start back at episode 1 of Peak Human. So many great episodes. I've had on some of the best guests around the world, top names in metabolic health, in diet and lifestyle, in strength. And reach out if you have any guest suggestions or you want to say hi at Food Lies. I am Food Lies on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. You can find the intro to the Food Lies series on YouTube. Just go to the Food Lies YouTube. It's the featured video. It's amazing. It's 3.5 minutes. It took us so long. We handmade almost every shot. This is how good this film's going to be. It's going to be life-changing. It's going to impact the world in a huge way. It's going to be the answer to the Game Changers and all the other vegan films, giving people the truth about nutrition. So I'm glad you found this podcast and a little bit more about my episode today with Dr. Suneel Dhand. He is an internist in Hyannis, Massachusetts, and is affiliated with multiple hospitals in the area, including Salem Hospital and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. He received his medical degree from the University of Wales College of Medicine and has been in practice for about 20 years. Dr. Suneel is great. I first heard of him on Twitter with his excellent tweet thread on what he learned in the last 3 years. He's woken up. He actually woke up far before that. He started to see through the sick care system. He's a freedom fighter. He knows what's going on. He understands a good diet and lifestyle. And he's a great guy. And we did a great episode. And we actually have to do this episode in 2 pieces. The first part will be going to YouTube, and the second part will be on Rumble. I have been censored on YouTube. I have 2 strikes, so I cannot share certain parts of this interview with YouTube. So please listen to the first 15 minutes and then jump over to the Food Lies Rumble for the rest of the show. If you're listening to the audio version, it's all just one episode, so you're all good there. So thanks again for listening. Thanks again for supporting us at nosetotale.org. Go to Nose to Tail, get the meat delivered to you, get our body care products. Our pork is back in stock, pasture raised, low PUFA diet. Pork gets a bad rap for a good reason, because usually it's raised in a big old warehouse on a terrible diet of soy meal and other garbage. We do pasture raised. We have them moving around, rotational grazing, holistic management. They get a supplementary feed that's no corn, no soy. They're out there eating bushes and shrubs and grasses, and it's great. So get that back in stock, nosetotale.org, body care, biltong, so many good things. Soap, seasonings, we got it all. Go to nosetotale.org, get it delivered straight to you. We have free shipping options and discounted shipping options, so check it out. So again, go to saving.org, get on the newsletter, support us and the ranchers at nosetotale.org. Find us at the Sapien Center in Austin. We're doing some great activities and events here. And enjoy this episode. We'll see you next week. Hello. Hey, Dr. Suneel Dhand. How's it going?
Hello, Brian. Good to join you here. I'm doing great.
Well, great to have you on. I first heard of you only a couple months ago, actually. I know you've been doing some great work for a while. You have a YouTube channel. You are a physician. Why don't you kind of tee us up a little bit and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a 1 minute bio then. So I was born in the UK in London, grew up over there, right outside the city. And then I went to medical school, a city called Cardiff, which is a couple of hours west of London. Graduated, I worked in the healthcare service over there for a year and a half or so. And then I hopped across the pond, did my residency training in internal medicine in Baltimore. And since then, I've worked up and down the East Coast, different states, Massachusetts, New York, Florida. I've experienced a wide range of healthcare settings. And I would say probably a couple of years into my life as an attending physician, I grew very dismayed with the factory like nature of medicine. And I started to realize how much of what we were seeing was purely the result of chronic lifestyle related diseases. And that inspired me to write about it. I wrote my first book on the topic. And I would say my interest in that area has grown exponentially since then. And what I know now, 10 years after I wrote that book, I'd probably write a different book now because so much more has come to light. And I got very interested in how we can improve our healthcare system in general. I started a blog, and my articles were published on multiple different sites across US physician sites mainly.
Mm.
And then, boom, COVID hit, everything changed. And I would say that I was, quote unquote, one of the contrarians. I was not in line with the establishment thought. I thought right from the beginning that our response was highly flawed. It was highly driven by sensationalism. We were not looking at data. We had a total lack of logic. And I thought a lot of what we were seeing as well, combined with multiple different factors, including a total lack of focus on baseline metabolic health. And then everything came together. I started making videos. My YouTube channel grew more popular. And then I started to disseminate my message across different social media platforms and gained a following. And I really have a passion for what I'm saying. And I believe large segments of the population, maybe the majority, are totally uninformed about the things that they should be.
Wow. They really are. The masses, we need to wake up the masses, and that's what we're going to do today. We talked before we got on air about YouTube censorship, and I have 2 strikes already. They dug up videos from 11 months ago that I did with a
Wow.
doctor just sharing his experience, and it was taken down. I have 5 videos taken down. And so we are going to move to Rumble at a certain point. So if you're watching this on YouTube, we are going to keep it censor proof in the beginning,
I
and
know that
then
feeling.
we will get into the real stuff, the real truth that's going on after that. And hopefully this doesn't get me my 3rd strike, just even saying this. Because I tried to apply and they just appeal, sorry, and they just said no. It's your appeal is denied, 2nd strike, 3rd strike, you're out. So we're living in crazy times. That's one of the topics we'll discuss today. Is just the nature of free speech and medical information and disinformation and misinformation. And I'm glad that you kind of woke up pretty early. I woke up to this healthcare, sick care, big food, big pharma stuff many years ago, but I also didn't wake up fully until COVID happened. And so there is kind of this great awakening where it's almost like they overplayed their hand and they're kind of waking up more people, but still the masses are still just going along life like normal. And yeah, maybe we can start with just a little more of your history of waking up just 10 years ago and what you saw in the medical system.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, you've touched upon a few things there. And for our audience, we will be very careful until that rumble moment hits. And I really advise you to go over and watch it because that's when the juicy truth conversation will start. Because I've been there myself. I have been censored wrongly across multiple platforms. I'm still standing and I'm very proud of that. I will not back down. We cannot let those forces do what they want to do, which is to silence any other thoughts, to label things wrongly as misinformation happening all the time. So we'll be careful over the next few minutes, but let me get to my own
Mhm.
awakening. So I am an internal medicine doctor in the hospital. I have been since I first became an attending after my residency. And I was just amazed only a year or two into working as a doctor, realizing that basically the majority of the illnesses that I was seeing, people coming in, were all ticking certain boxes. And this was purely a result of poor lifestyle, which I believe is deliberately promoted within this country because, let's face it, there's no money in being healthy. Whereas large segments of the establishment, including Big Pharma, really benefit from you being as sick, unwell, and obese as possible. The medical establishment benefits. Now, I'm not saying that doctors want people to be sick, but our whole system and payment model relies on there being recurring customers. And I would see obesity is obviously the big one, no pun intended. Um, Rates in the United States, which are totally not natural and unthinkable in any other country. Type 2 diabetes and the complications, young people getting heart disease, peripheral vascular disease, so much lifestyle related diseases. And I don't think anybody makes the choice to be sick. I think a lot of people can get stuck in a cycle. We have unique problems in this country, like affordability of food. We can talk more about that later. But I think it's very easy because the mainstream culture in the United States, by default, will push everybody down that route. And if you want to get away from that, if you want to live a healthy life, it is a total fight against this constant mainstream culture all around you. All you have to do, Brian, is watch 5 minutes of cable TV ads. Literally 90% of it is advertising drugs, unhealthy foods. What chance do people have? Even in my state now, marijuana ads are absolutely everywhere, and the medical establishment is completely on board with this. The default is to be unhealthy, and our whole system is set up for masses of the population to be unhealthy, and it's totally unnatural. And I cannot, as a doctor who went into this profession for the right reasons, sit idly by. So I realized this 10, 11 years ago. I started to write more about it, and my belief in that has just been reinforced more and more. And we're in a worse position now as a society than we were 10 years ago, especially after 3 years of COVID.
It's really sad. This is exactly what I'm trying to say is it's so bad it must be on purpose. You know, you don't get everything backwards on accident where people are so unhealthy and that recommendations are so backwards. So maybe you can talk more about the incentives being misaligned because I'm sure you've seen that as a doctor and in the hospital especially.
Yeah, so the way that the payment model is set up in the United States is that doctors will basically be paid the more sick patients are. So the more diabetes or heart disease there is, the more likely someone is to develop an issue and need a procedure done. Okay, so say, let's take a simple one. If you're a gastroenterologist, we know that one of the biggest risk factors for having indigestion is a terrible diet. People have, there's GI issues. Every other person now has a GI issue. It's because we eat terrible food, primarily ultra processed foods, which is a 5-hour topic in itself.
Mm.
But when you're in a field like that, okay, so you're a gastroenterologist in the United States as opposed to one in Africa or another part of the world, you are going to be paid for doing more procedures. So all these people will come in with issues. They will need endoscopies, colonoscopies. You'll have to do CT scans on them because they have all of these symptoms that are related to a poor lifestyle. Same thing as a cardiologist. Younger people are developing heart disease younger and younger, and we have a system that will reward doctors for doing more procedures. And even if you're not a doctor that does procedures, if you're simply a doctor that prescribes medications, the way that Big Pharma is now in bed with the medical establishment, all of these medicines, you see so many new ones being advertised on TV. Basically, Big Pharma is giving physicians and healthcare facilities huge incentives as well to prescribe these medicines. Now, it's not as bad as it was 20, 30 years ago in terms of open kickbacks, but there are other incentives for doctors to be in bed with Big Pharma and then prescribe these 150 new diabetes medications. And for a doctor to not even think, why has 80% of my population got diabetes? This is not natural.
It's scary. It's scary. So yes, I know they have had some regulations where they can't just like openly like take doctors to dinner or openly give them stuff, but I know there's different ways around it. See, there's also different ways around just lobbying and stuff at the higher level. So maybe you could just talk a little more about that. I mean, even funding studies or just how they get around this stuff.
Yeah, well, you can still take doctors for dinner. That's still openly done. You have to declare it. I mean, you can't do it in secret. And there are websites which nobody goes to where you can look at which doctors are being paid by Big Pharma. But this is happening at a mass level. Doctors are making millions, maybe billions of dollars all across the country from Big Pharma. I don't know if it's like 20 years ago where they could take you on vacation, etc., but they can still give you a lot. as long as you declare it.
Hmm.
That's
And
still
then,
widespread. And same with procedures as well. So a new procedure will be developed and they'll go out and they'll try to sell the procedure to a doctor. And that doctor will know that there'll be a certain level of reimbursement for the procedure. And maybe the company will give them a discount on what they pay for the product. This is very widespread, Brian. It's very sad. Whereas the role of the doctor in the model of Hippocrates should be, I want to keep my patient well. I don't want you. Let's see, my goal, one of the things I do, one of the best feelings I have as a doctor, and I've had this feeling with multiple patients, is I'll put them on a lifestyle medicine program, an exercise program. I'm also a certified personal trainer, so I will advise them. And type 2 diabetes is very reversible, as you know. And it's the best feeling when a patient comes in having lost weight, and I say, you don't need your metformin or other expensive diabetes medicine anymore. And frequently they can stop their blood pressure medicines. That's my goal, is to get people off medicines. But the entire push is the other way, to get more and more Americans hooked and dependent on pills.
well, that's the thing. It's these doctors aren't evil. I don't think anyone is really evil. No, people became doctors to try to help, but it's just the system is flawed and the incentive structure is flawed, right? So how I'm wondering how you even get paid, like how you even do that because you don't make any money advocating a healthy diet and lifestyle. So is it like it's just so impossible for doctors to even do it? Are you still trying to slip that in?
It's impossible. You have to work outside of the system. So I do coaching outside of the system. I do my social media work, but let's not like throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are lots of good things we do in medicine. And I work as a hospital medicine acute care physician. And where we're very good in medicine is reversing acute things. So you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, you have a broken leg, it gets fixed and you leave. So that's what I deal with in my clinical practice. I work with acute hospital events. We get them better, hopefully in a couple of days, and discharge them. So that's something different from the chronic type of diseases that I'm talking about, where we need a revolution in terms of how we think about things.
Well, that makes sense. Do you try to slip it in some of this info to them in these acute settings though? I'm just
Oh, I
curious.
do. Yeah, all the time. Every other patient nowadays is an obese patient with an issue, and I'll sit down and I'll talk to them about the dangers of processed foods. And it is shocking as well. I'll give you an example. This has happened in every single hospital I work in. You should see the hospital food that is given to patients that are sick. Ultra processed. They'll load diabetics up with carbohydrates, and people are just clueless in our current system. And I do believe in a couple of 100 years' time, people will laugh at what we were doing, how we don't understand that we are what we eat. It is the single biggest determinant, not just our physical health. I mean, mental health is another huge topic as well. How we feel physically and how we feel mentally is intrinsically related to the food we eat. Hospitals don't have a clue. So yeah, absolutely. I'll frequently, this happened last week. I went into a room and it was a newly diagnosed diabetic who had had a cardiac event. And she was sitting there and she had ordered cakes and this high sugar drink. And I said, had any doctor told you before that you have an issue with your sugar? And the response was, well, yes, but they're thinking of starting me on a medication soon. And I was thinking to myself, my goodness, they've set you up for that path. But did they ever talk to you about diet? And I sat and I talked to her and she said, yeah, I love carbs. I eat a ton of carbs every day. She was on processed foods, lots of sugar. I mean, why did that discussion not happen before I saw her, before she'd already had a major catastrophe with her health? But the attitude of primary care doctors, who are really stretched, they do an impossible job, is, oh, you're going down this road. Here's a leaflet on how to change your diet, which nobody ever reads. They just tick the box, given our patient education, but they haven't really. And then they'll tell them, well, if it gets worse, we'll start you on a medicine. But those medicines only, it's like putting a bucket under a leaking roof. You're just like taking the water, but the problem is still there. Eventually, the roof is going to collapse because all we do with a medicine is try to fix the numbers, but the downstream problem is always still there. That's our philosophy with modern medicine.
Yeah, I mentioned this. There's a sort of documentary type video called Rockefeller Medicine that I can link to in the show notes because it's so bad that it must be set up like this on purpose. And if you trace it back, it is set up like this on purpose. The system wide, not the individual doctors, but to have this patch system that doesn't address the root cause. It's insane. Maybe talk a little more about the processed food and food as medicine. I have many guests talking about this stuff, and I don't know your exact views other than processed foods is bad, which is good enough for me. That's pretty much where I'm at now.
Yeah,
It's like I don't have super strong opinions. I'm not like carbohydrates are going to kill you. I'm like processed carbohydrates are going to kill you. It's like that's the
yeah,
big thing. It's not like I'm afraid of fruit or something. It's the people aren't eating fruit. It's like no one got diabetes from eating fruit. They got
yeah.
diabetes from eating ultra processed foods and a million other refined ingredients and sugar and this and that. So, yeah, what would you, if you did have time, how would you kind of coach a diabetic or someone who's obese or both?
Okay, well, firstly, I think when it comes to diet, a lot of people get fixated on a one size fits all approach, and there never is. Everybody is different. What works for somebody may not work for someone else, but I think there are broad principles you can adhere to. And I myself have learned a lot in the last few years from where I once was, which was almost taking advice straight from the CDC about food groups and what you should and shouldn't eat, which we know by now is a mistake because they're also highly linked to the food industry. So my basic advice, I will ask people typically what they eat in a day, and I focus first on processed foods because I think that's the worst thing of all. And I will ask them if they eat a lot of food out of packets and packages, and invariably the answer is yes. And I will try to tell them that in very simple terms, you have food in two groups: one which is as natural as possible, come from the ground, or as natural as you can get, away from the other end, ultra processed, which is made by humans. Anything made by humans is going to be suspect. Look at the ingredients. If there's more than two ingredients on it, then try to avoid it. Have food naturally. There's plenty of ways you can make it taste nice, season it, etc. And then I'll tell them for the specific things to watch out for. Number one, obviously, sugar. Minimize sugar intake. Other additives, preservatives, seed oils is a big one. All of these things are pro-inflammatory. So basic advice is the closest you can get to natural foods, whether it's vegetables, fruit, dairy, etc., eggs, meat, the closer it is to being untouched by humans, the better you will be. And then if I have more time, I'll get into the fact that the calorie model is broken, etc. But that's my number one piece of advice. It's very hard to get fat and unwell off those natural foods. And then the things you should watch out for: packets, packages, seed oil, sugar, etc. So that's my basic
Mm.
advice. And then we take everything from there. Food groups, etc. It also depends on what your goals are. If you go to the gym a lot, if you work out, you'll want more protein, etc. Protein can actually become more important as you get older.
Mhm.
Carbohydrates, I think, are intrinsically linked to this processed issue as well. And we are not really built to consume carbohydrates as we think of them, like bread, pasta, etc. They're still not as bad as certain processed foods, but generally, the good advice is to keep them to a minimal. I don't agree with extremes. Now, there's a lot of evidence behind a ketogenic diet. And again, I can see how it would work because it's basically getting as close to nature and you being a caveman as possible. Um, it works for people. Would I recommend it long term? Do you have to have it? Not necessarily. And fasting as well. Same principle. We're going back to first principles. When we were cavemen, we fasted for a long time. It's a natural state to be. In the wild, animals will eat and then they may not eat for 24 hours. So, generally, anything that is as close to nature as possible while living in the modern world is very likely to be good for you. Anything that is man made, unnatural, eating 5 times a day, etc., is bad. So, that's the simple way I start.
Well, that's great. That's where I'm at. Absolutely. It's don't be afraid of animal foods too. That I really embrace animal foods and just processed foods are the problem. That's it. Like I think that's as simple as diet gets and it can solve probably 95% of people's issues. I know there's differences and nuances, and some people, have certain problems that may need to be addressed and all that. But that's it. It's as simple as that. No one
Yeah,
wants to hear it. And yeah, no one needs to yeah, you don't have to do keto long term. You don't have to do anything long term. You can see what works for you. You can sort of reset your metabolism even just by going to real foods for a while. And I think it's actually almost impossible to get sick from real foods. I think in modern times, I don't think anyone really does it. I would challenge anyone that claims to be on a actual whole foods diet that and somehow got sick from that. I don't think there's anyone who's done
yeah,
it. You know what I mean? I know you're being careful as a doctor and you don't want to make blanket statements, but if you just eat foods close to nature, animal foods plus plant foods, unrefined, I think it's impossible to get sick from the food. I mean, yes, you can have
yeah.
other things. You can have heavy metals. There could have toxins in the environment. You could have a genetic disorder. But from those foods, like throughout history, that's what we had available. And that's how we became human and it got here today. And we weren't obese and diabetic, or we wouldn't have got here today.
Completely agree. Brian, when was the last time you saw an obese animal in nature?
It's impossible. It's only the ones that
Don't
eat
see
our
it.
human foods, like a squirrel
Yeah.
that eats out of a dumpster
Yeah,
or a pet.
exactly. We make animals sick, which is a huge caveat um, with the meat issue as well. So most people don't understand if you're going to eat meat, the fact is most people are eating meat from diseased, sick animals, which is horrible. But those animals are very diseased in the United States. And I've seen pictures, you've probably seen them too. Meat looks different in certain countries in South America to the US because we've diseased the animals. We've fed them rubbish, and then we eat the rubbish back again. So that's also a big caveat there.
That's a good point too, and that's why I started Nose to Tail. A few times I actually bring up my company, but yeah, exactly why I started my company is to get people the good meat that's grass fed and finished 100%, regeneratively raised, helps environment. So yeah, we do it right, and so yeah, definitely encourage people to get it from us, get it from your local rancher, and find people that raise meat properly. Because yeah, you don't want to eat yeah, disease. Basically, it's
Yeah, same
morbid
with
fat.
eggs, dairy, all of it, free range eggs. You have to have good animals making the product. It's a little bit more difficult with vegetables and fruits, although you could argue pesticides and everything. But it's general, they just fed water and have like CO2 or whatever. But then yeah, as long as it's as natural as possible, again, that's it. And a big start, because people might find it very difficult to jump from the rubbish that is consumed, what is it, 60 to 70% ultra processed food intake now for everybody's diet. It might be very difficult to jump over to completely organic raw food, but as long as people realize that, and it's going to take a shift in mindset, and I'm cautiously optimistic we will get there, because two people like us probably were having a conversation in the 1940s and 50s about how do we tell people that tobacco is bad, how do
Mm,
we do this, everybody's smoking, but things happen and the truth is the truth. And we're fast at a point, in fact I think we may already be here, Brian, where sub-Saharan Africa is now more metabolically healthy than the United States.
mhm.
And ultimately, this is going to be the downfall of the country. I love this country. I'm sure you do as well. I want this country. I want America to win. I want the UK to win. But we're not going to win if masses of our population are unwell. So we are going to reach a breaking point sooner or later. If nothing else, it's going to bankrupt the country. You cannot have every other person obese. And again, I don't mean to sound harsh here. I recently did some traveling. I went out west to Arizona, Las Vegas, and it is shocking. I cannot imagine what people from other countries think, but literally every other person now. I'm not talking about being overweight, which 30 years ago was rare. I'm talking about being clinically and morbidly obese. We are off the charts. It is going to destroy our country sooner or later. We cannot go down this path.
It's obvious to some like us, and yeah, I mean, I think people are changing, but I think it's just a small number of people are changing. But maybe there will be a breaking point, like you said, that it's impossible to sustain a country and the way we're going, and it's man, it's getting bad. But let's shift gears though, because you're kind of talking about the waking up process. And I first heard of you because of your tweet thread that was here, I'll read it real quick. On the bright side, I thank the last 2.5 years for completely waking me up to the following 1 through 10. So we're going to do this on Rumble and we'll go through
Okay,
these
good
10
idea.
things. And so, yeah, just switch over. If you're listening audio only, it's just going to continue. But we're going to do this on Rumble. I'll put the link in the caption and switch over now.